This is our inaugural GSB Alumni Teach session, inspired by the GSB Student Teach sessions that happened at the GSB when Lamia and I were students there. We wanted to bring the same concept to the alumni population. By way of introduction, my name is Duane. I am a class of 2014 MBA. I am a member of the Stanford GSB Alumni Association Board of Directors. But the Alumni Teach sessions are intended to allow alums who have experience in a particular area to share their experience with their fellow alumni. And the idea here isn't really necessarily to be a masterclass so much as it is to be an opportunity for folks to learn something new and maybe generate, some ideas that they can be sharing at their next cocktail party or when they're talking to friends, just some insight that would be unique and new and different. And so I am delighted that for our inaugural session, we have one of my fellow GSBAA board members, Dr. Lamia Youseff, who, as you probably saw from the invitation, has a extremely impressive career in the technology space, having worked, in a senior role for pretty much all of the big tech firms, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Apple, and have been really involved in the AI and cloud computing side of things there. So without further ado, welcome, Dr. Youseff. Thank you so much for being here. As I mentioned, you've worked at some of the biggest tech companies. I would love to hear, and I'd love for the group to hear sort of how you ended up in tech. Like, what brought you there? What was your background that kind of made you interested in this space? Because you've been doing it for 25 years. You were kind of early in AI, without a doubt. So.
I love the introduction, KJ, and thank you so much for hosting me. What exciting times it is to be able to meet with fellow GSPers around the world and share a little bit about what's happening in AI and the AI world, especially with everything that have been happening yesterday with DeepSeek, and we will touch on this in a little bit. But what brought me to AI? Funny story. I thought to start with a funny story. So back when I was a kid, my mom was working on her dissertation, on her PhD at the time in education. And for those of us here old enough, although I don't want to age myself, basically you remember the typewriter. So in order for her to finish every chapter, she would, handwrite it, go to the local typewriter, which happened to be in a different neighborhood, and the typewriter was a job. So a guy or a gal was a typewriter, and she goes and she give it to them. They go and they type it. And then if there is any edits or corrections, or she wants to add a sentence, or she wants to remove a sentence, then they have to rewrite the whole page again. It was a nightmare. So after doing that for a few months, my mom and my dad decided that it's so much overhead. Let's buy a computer at home. And so that she can use Word to edit and docs in order to be able to edit her dissertation and to be able to work on it. And it used to be super expensive. I think it was more expensive than getting a new car at that time. It was something around the range of $7,000, equivalent of $7,000. And that was back in Cairo. So they went and they bought this computer. We put it in the living room. My brother and I were allowed to use it for a couple of hours a day. We were gamers, so we would use it for gaming and, And then one day, we had a newspaper delivered to our house that says that computers get viruses. And at the time, basically virus was, like human virus or, basically flu or something. But computers get a virus. Oh my gosh, we need to protect our gaming fun, device. And what should we do? In our very naive mind, we will inspect every file that we have on the computer in order to make sure that none of them is a virus. So we go and we start inspecting everything, and we see a file on the desktop that says chapter 7. We double click on it, we open it, and we don't understand the word, all jargons. So we say, that must be a virus, let's delete it. So we delete it. Next day, we see chapter 5. Oh my gosh, another virus, it's replicating itself. Let's get only to realize later, a few days later, that we have been deleting my mom's dissertation that she had been working on for quite some time. When she realized that and was about to return the computer because it was eating her files. So that's when we stopped doing it. But that's got me super excited about everything that's happening with computers and with the software industry and with the hardware industry and how we can use it to change the world in different ways. So this is my funny story of the day. Hope, basically, hope it kind of, gives you an idea of what your kids might be doing in terms of deleting files or in terms of, doing a lot of mishaps. It's okay. They are learning, they are growing. But that got me later on to study computer science in American University in Cairo. And then that took me from there to I learned. I was very interested in learning more, so I got to UC Santa Barbara to do my doctorate degree in computer science. Initially, I wanted to build large-scale machine learning, deep learning models, which what I learned in undergrad. However, I was told that we don't have enough computational resources. So I was like, okay, let me solve the computational resources problem and then come back to solve the large models problem. However, I got to work in HPC and got to, from UC Santa Barbara, I got to MIT building large-scale HPC systems and cloud computing. And from there, got to Google, where I was one of the founding engineers of Google Cloud. And from Google, got to Microsoft, where I was working on AI applications for networking appliances. And from there, got to work with some of the biggest Fortune 500 migrating to the cloud. So got to see also what does it mean to migrate an on-prem to a cloud provider, very similar to what we're doing today with the AI migration from a non-AI workload to an AI workload. Then got to lead Facebook team, FB Learner, which is an end-to-end machine learning development cycle that was serving machine learning models for all Facebook workloads from newsfeed all the way to Instagram, to ads, then came to GSB because I really wanted to learn about the business side of doing large-scale AI applications and AI systems, but also learn about the strategy and what works and what doesn't work and open source versus closed source and so many different questions that just, really enjoyed learning about and really expanded my knowledge significantly and let me make so many dear friends and so many dear relationships in GSB before going to Apple and leading a multi-billion-dollar AI product over there in ads, where we were building a team of about 150 engineers around the world in different geos and being able to build and know really what it takes to build such a large-scale AI system that's basically, serving nanosecond delays or basically, very, very high throughput, very low latency application to the user in the other side in a privacy preserving way, which is something that Apple innovated in the space. Happy to dive into all of the different areas, but it all started from deleting files that happened to be my mom's dissertation.
So it sounds like, you're kind of really the whole stack. You started out trying to work in, machine learning and realized you needed more compute. And when you at UC Santa Barbara, then that's when you made the transition to sort of focusing on large scale computing, recognizing that was going to be critical for future machine learning and, the eventual development of AI today as we know it. So over the course of that career, was there one moment, aside from deleting your mom's dissertation files, that was sort of a cusp moment, that moment where you're like, this is really going to be a big deal, or was somehow otherwise transformational where you realized this is a space that I should be investing my time?
Absolutely. One that comes to mind when I started learning about machine learning, again in undergrad, and my mom came back from a doctor visit, was a news that the doctor suspects that she has breast cancer. And that was quite a very scary time for us as family, but also basically, what can we do? How can we help? What needs to be done? It happens that at school, I was also studying how do we use deep learning and basically how do we train a supervised machine learning model in order to be able to detect benign versus malignant breast cancer without going through the autopsy or the biopsy in this case. And just hit me. I mean, this is so powerful. I can remove the struggles that my mom is going through by using machine learning, by using computers, and that can change lives. It can save lives, especially at the high cost we could afford to go through, but it's usually very high cost. Many people cannot afford it. So how can we use machine learning in order to be able to provide this kind of capability to millions of people around the world, especially with cancer being one of the leading diseases for humanity today around the world? And how can we use machine learning to relieve some of the human struggles and and improve our human experience, basically, in order to be able to bring value to the world? Luckily, my mom's cancer was benign, and she's healthy and she's doing well. But also, it's the case that it's not the case for everyone around the world. So that just hit me. I mean, we can do a lot of really good impact in the world using machine learning. Why we're not using it for that? It took 25 years to come around to the point where today we're looking into integrating machine learning models into different radiology machines and devices in hospitals. There is a lot of challenges from policy and from HIPAA compliance and what have you. But I am a tech advisor to one company out of Kansas City that have been working with some of the leading universities and leading medical centers around the world, I mean the who's who, in order to be able to integrate machine learning models on the device in a way such that it can actually detect the malignant cancers early on without the involvement or with the human in the loop, with later radiologists being able to screen it, but being able to predict it much earlier than most of the current data can show. So yes, the moment is being able to change the world using machine learning, being able to improve our human experience using machine learning. And that's what led me to where I am today.
Yeah, it's very macro, very powerful. So I think a lot of folks, the extent of their experience with AI is really around sort of the day-to-day to productivity apps that we use, whether it's asking ChatGPT to draft an email or asking Gemini for a recipe. So just more nuts and bolts for folks who are listening in. What are the personal productivity apps that you have found to be most helpful that employ AI? How are you using it day to day in your personal life? Put aside the companies you're advising and the things you're doing for the larger technology companies.
Absolutely. So when I think about the recent AI basically evolution, so ChatGPT and 2020 and till today, the last 2 years, I think we are really investing in 3 different capabilities that are highlighting and that's improving our productivity. One of them is the generative AI capability. Another one is the chain of thought or the reasoning capability. And then the third one is the action AI, being able to have AI take actions on our behalf. So every time that I come across a different task in my business or in my work or in my life, I usually think through which one of these new capabilities can it simplify. So when we come to generative AI, for example, I think about content and anything that has to do with text, anything that has to do with generating content, whether it is a marketing content, whether it's a blog post, whether it's drafting emails, whether it's keeping track of notes, whether it's even cleaning data. So if I have a huge amount of data that I want to make sure that it's complete or make sure that it has some missing data, I usually, would put it into ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity and have it completed for me in order to be able to have cleaner data and more, but also the case of, around search. We have been using search for a long amount of time. So usually I use several models at the same time, all of the, one dimension, and several of them where I go and try, this might work here, this might work there. But when it comes to chain of thought, and the reasoning part, it's still coming. It's not as advanced, but I have been using it in terms of helping me with some of the brainstorming, maybe coming up with new names, coming up with new ideas. Even I've been starting to follow a new diet. So I go to ChatGPT and say, I'm following this new diet. This is the picture of what I have in my fridge. Tell me what I should cook. And it just, magically comes up with new recipes that I have never thought of. And I'm always pleased with the outcome. I love to cook. So it kind of, makes it a nice adventure. Like, really, should I put this and that and that? And I try it and it works out well. So that's usually the case. And then Action AI is where it's coming, where's that interesting work that have been invested in, especially agentic software and agents and AI agents and consumer apps and AI assistants. Hasn't been advanced yet, hasn't been there yet, but I think it's going to be happening very soon. Can't wait to integrate it more into my workflows and into my day-to-day.
Well, very good. Very good. Yeah, I'm sure all of us have had similar experiences. I think one of the things that I find most powerful is using the AI for data analysis, putting in a bunch of messages from clients or customers and say, what's the sentiment that we're getting here, and being able to sort of make product decisions based on that. So that's fantastic. So now you've a lot of experience sort of in the past. Looking forward, last week when we spoke and we said, so what do we expect 2025 to look like? This was obviously pre, the DeepSeek release. And so there might be a slightly different answer to this question today, but what do you see as being, the biggest evolution in AI over the next year? Granted, we've had massive leaps over the last 3 or 4 years, so it was really hard to tell. But based on your experience, what do you see as being sort of the biggest impact or biggest evolution of AI in the next year?
Absolutely. Yes, DeepSeek was the conversation of town all along, but I don't think it's going to change my answer in terms of what I'm excited about, what I'm looking forward to in 2025. So I'll break it to two basically parts. One of them is why not DeepSeek? And then the other one is what are the technologies? And when I look at what happened yesterday with the market, I was looking at, at the report at the end of the day, $600 billion was lost just in reaction to the announcement and the launch of DeepSeek.
And that was just NVIDIA lost $600 billion, not market. That was one company.
I thought it was maybe, yes, absolutely. But it's a big number, no matter what. I get just a crazy number. And the case here is that, when I look at it, and if I were to evaluate DeepSeek, there is 3 angles to it. Number one, I think that the number is reacting. The market is completely irrationally reacting to the news in terms of how it's impacting the investment, how it's impacting the market movement. And that's for a number of reasons. Number one, from a technical aspect point of view, what DeepSeek have done is it have very cleverly and smartly and strategically applied optimizations and applied a new technique or old techniques in new ways, such as reinforcement learning, such as in order to be able to acquire more advanced capabilities of what we have been. But in the end of the day, it's a transformer architecture, which what we have been doing since 2016. So it's basically transformer architecture that we're optimizing. It wasn't the very first time that this actually happens. Rather than over the last 2-3 years, every day we have, I would say every few months, to be more accurate, we have a new model coming up that's applying an optimization. This time the optimization have shown significant improvement in terms of the performance as well as in terms of the computational needs, yet it's an improvement. I would be super excited and I would say, yes, it's worth the impact if it was a new neural architecture or if it was a new way of doing AI models versus the current transformer architecture, but yet we're still doing some optimization. So this is the technical aspect. Number two, I think one of the reasons for the reaction was the geopolitical aspects of where DeepSeek is coming from, and basically being a Chinese model. But we forgot that it's also an open source model. So basically, this is not the very first time that we have a non-American model that's leading the way in terms of capabilities. Actually, funny enough, last year, January 2024, Mistral launched with some optimizations around the same, techniques, and basically have led the way for others to be able to build on. And what DeepSeek is using today is some of the innovation that Mistral have and Llama 3 had created over the last year. So basically it is a building block and we're all learning from each other. And then the third one is actually the market dynamics. And what I've noticed over the last 2 or 3 years since I started my consulting business, I've spoken to easily 400 or 500 investors. And while some of them are very technically deep in the details of how to build a system. Most of the investors and analysts out in the market just reactive to how the market is behaving and have a lot of FOMO around AI. So if something happens, the reaction is overblown to a great extent just because of the FOMO and because of the lack of the technical knowledge. However, when we talk about large language models and models, foundational models specifically, I would say we're talking about a 2x2 matrix. We're talking about open source versus closed source on one side, and then on the other side, we're talking about large language models versus small language models. And basically, you have 4 different quadrants that you're creating. And when we talk about large language models and we talk about open source models, I mean, usually that's being built in order to be able to get to AGI, or artificial general intelligence, which is the capability to be able to build a general intelligence capability or general intelligence technical landscape and technical skills across the board for different models. Different people might define it differently, but like this is very informal definition. So the question here is that in order for us to get to AGI, we need to build bigger models. And while optimizations extremely help in terms of being able to reduce the computational capacity, my expectation here is that from an open source and from a large foundational model, what we're going to do is that we're going to take these optimizations, we're going to take these new techniques and how they are being applied, we're going to integrate it, we're going to see them integrated into other large scale models. We're going to build even bigger models that's more capable of being able to get to the next step. And this is going to help us in terms of achieving AGI. So in a sense, yes, good technical improvements, but not a reason to panic over as what we have seen yesterday in the market. Coming back to your first question, specifically around the technologies that I am excited about. So last November, I was invited to give the keynote talk at Bank of America Merrill Lynch global conference on what do we expect to see in 2025. And in that talk, I identified 5 different technologies that I'm keeping very close eyes on. And first one, I'm sure that is going to happen. First one, and then the last one, it goes, like in basically in the spectrum of higher risk, maybe not there yet, maybe I'm not sure yet. But first one is enterprise AI. We're going to see a tsunami of enterprise application migration into the AI, similar to what we have seen in the cloud era. And I think that's where all of the big hyperscalers are gearing up by getting huge number of and investing in data centers and getting huge number of GPUs and chips and what have you. Following that, I expect agentic AI or the agents technology. And agentic AI has been there for quite a long amount of time. We have been working and building agents since reinforcement learning. I think reinforcement learning is a 1980s technology. So it has been around for quite a significant amount of time. Yet today we are at the inflection point where it's becoming more integrated, more impactful. We're addressing the use cases, we're addressing the work that we're doing, and we have some of those startups are coming from our own. Like alumni base. So we have Multion/Please AI is one of the companies that's coming out from GSB at an MSXer 22, if I'm not mistaken, who have worked and partnered with a CS student in order to be able to build the company. So there is a lot of innovation that's happening in this area, and it's going to be quite impactful. And I expect a lot of really good progress in 2025 on agentic AI. To somewhat less confidence would be around humanoids and robots. And that's because we are finally at the inflection point of integrating foundational models on the software layer with the hardware that's building underneath, such that we can give the humanoids or can give the robots the ability to be able to perform a variety of tasks in a way that's going to be very impactful. And that's way is going to be very helpful, not just in the factory. So we have been using robots in the factory or in the warehouse. If you have been to Sam's Club in the last year or year and a half, I saw some videos, but I was told that they already have robots that kind of surveys all of the different shelves to tell the manager what's missing and where he should send more requests for merchandise or assets in order to be able to restock the shelves and what have you, but also or very helpful and integrating in terms of managing the workforce in the warehouse and as well as in the factory. Amazon have been doing such a great job integrating robots in their shipping centers, in their centers overall. So that's another area the challenge here is, how do we have humanoids at home that can integrate and that can behave well around kids, pets, and us humans? That's not going to hit us, like in the face if we're, like moving towards the fridge or something, although that might be helpful sometimes. But that's another technology that's also, like very exciting, humanoids and robots. Causal AI is another one, specifically around reasoning and being able to create if this happens, that's going to happen. If this changes, then this is what we expect on the other side of the changes. Very early, still there is a lot of investment, especially in the academic world. We see a lot of new reasoning capability being added into the large language models. I expect the announcement and the technical improvements that have been announced by DeepSeek yesterday to make its way to other models as well, and that's going to open the doors for even more reasoning capabilities across the board. And then finally, one of the areas that I also keep an eye on is spatial AI, or having the system not just multimodal, not just the foundational model, not just multimodal, but being also aware of time and space around it when things move, when things change. So it's not only a video or a picture, rather than, and this is some of the areas that our CS department at Stanford is very innovative at, especially some of the work that Feifei Li have been doing in recent years. So I'm keeping an eye on all of these. I think it's very exciting times to be in AI. AI is such a long field. It was invented in 1956, yet it's now the time where it's really getting to the forefront of making an impact and integration into different industries. So cannot wait to see the impact and cannot wait to contribute to it.
Yes, we haven't touched on any of your concerns related to all of these things. So we'll get to that in a minute or so. Before we get there, though, obviously, all of these models, all of this development requires some training, requires some data, right? And so I think it was maybe 20 years ago, The Economist had a cover that said, data is the new oil, right? This is when, Amazon people realized, oh, Amazon's using all this data to figure stuff out about me, and it became clear that, data is powerful. How do you see data vis-a-vis AI? I mean, there's some obvious things there, but then how would you advise companies, and you do advise companies now, right, on maximizing what they're going to get out of their AI applications by improving or maximizing the data that they have?
Absolutely. Yes, data is the new oil. That is the unfair, unjust advantage for different enterprises, especially those who have been keeping their data behind firewalls and behind security walls. This is the real advantage here and the real asset here, and it's going to be very critical for them to activate this asset in order to be able to build machine learning. In my opinion, compute can be acquired through hyperscalers, and eventually it's going to be available and possible. Machine learning models, and especially foundational models, are going to be commoditized. It's a hot take. I know not everybody agrees, but models are going to be commoditized in the end of the day. But data is going to be the real asset in here, the real differentiation for different companies. And that's where a data strategy and building and scaling a data strategy early on for different companies is going to be super critical in order to be able to compete in an AI first world. So what does it mean about, like data strategy? It's all about where you store the data, whether it's digitalized or not, whether it's clean or not, whether it is complete or not, whether you have the right data versus the wrong data, whether you can use the data in some way or another, whether it's HIPAA compliant versus not HIPAA compliant, and all of these different questions that comes with what it takes to build a data strategy before we are ready to get it into an AI model. And in order to know whether we have the right data or not, it starts by trying to understand every enterprise capabilities, but also potential differentiating factor and potential products that can be developed using AI, or that can be optimized using AI, current products that can be optimized using AI, because that's where we can dive from there and delve into what data needs. What are our data needs in order to be able to build AI for this specific use case in order to be able to get it to the next step? But yes, absolutely, data is a new oil for sure.
Yeah, it always it always amazes me that a new technology comes along, and then there's this general perception that this will be a panacea that will solve our poor data problems, right? Oh, we've just installed Salesforce, so now all our contact data is going to be perfect. It's none of that matters if the data is not good that goes into it. And so I think this idea that AI is going to solve our data problems, it kind of goes the other way around, right? You need good data to power the AI. It's like getting a really nice car, but putting 86 octane in it, and it's not really going to run right.
I love this analogy. I might steal it from you.
It's a Ferrari with bad gas. Yeah. So moving on, we touched on this a little bit. Obviously, the large incumbents, the dominant, the Apples, the Googles, the Microsofts, which have massive repositories of data, have a real leg up here. But now, obviously, we saw, DeepSeek kind of jump right into the fray very quickly in the last week. You mentioned Mistral out of France from last year, and they're obviously still doing really well. How do you see things going between the big tech companies and the startup companies? Do the startups have a chance?
Absolutely. A big opportunity, actually, not just a chance. And the way that I kind of frame this question is more on innovator dilemma. Rob Siegel is very present in my mind when I say that. The way he describes. Yeah, so much kudos for him for all of the good work that he's doing at GSB. And it's big tech versus small tech. And he usually in our class used to say in the technical strategy class, he used to say it's all about big tech is like big elephant feet that are moving, and they can push anybody. They can kind of, and get rid of any small players. And the successful small tech or startups are the one who can dance in between their feet, who can move between their feet. It's true of AI as well. And yes, big tech have a lot of opportunities, especially from assets and especially from technical capabilities and technical talent, very important when we talk about AI, but also from distribution channels, which specifically makes a huge difference when we talk about consumer apps or when we talk about consumer AI or when we're talking about enterprise, especially when we see the AI migration, enterprise migration and enterprise AI capabilities being developed today. So very critical for big tech. However, big tech is also looking for problems that are already big enough in a market that's big enough, because otherwise it's not of interest to them. So it's always the trick for startups is to find a small market that's growing fast and that's actually going to be big in the next year, and that's where they can play, such that they can fly under the radar from what big tech is doing and from the attention of big tech until they are big enough to be able to have a really significant impact and stand head to head. Different times have different technologies, but one example that I'd love to see a case developed about is Databricks. Yeah. And Databricks played a really smart, very smart game, basically competing head to head with some of the biggest cloud players that are very keen on taking them out of the market at certain points and on competing with them. Yet they have worked not only on the technical side and innovating on the technical side, but also on the go-to-market side, especially from partnering with the second cloud provider at the time, Azure, working with their sales team, working directly on the ground with their customers in order to be able to actually address a real use case for the customer, enabling some of the tech players, the big tech players, Azure in this case, in the very early days, until Databricks was big enough to be able to compete with the other cloud providers. And basically, we see the amount of work and impact that they are doing today. So much kudos as well for the kind of model that they have developed. And I learned a lot from just watching what they are doing. So there is an opportunity, of course, for small tech to be able, or for startups to be able to compete in here. Very important to keep in mind that basically big tech sometimes is elephant feet that you need to dance around, but in the end of the day, there's always opportunity.
Yeah, now it seems clear, obviously, AI is having a massive impact in the technology space, which is, again, why the NASDAQ fell so far yesterday and the Dow climbed, which indicates that AI really hasn't quite made the impact it will be making in the real large markets, which are outside of technology, the non-pure technology companies. And so that kind of leads to my next question for you, which is how do you see AI impacting the non-technology companies over the next couple of years? Because that's really where the big markets are. So everyone, obviously in Silicon Valley, we're kind of tend to be in our bubble in our tech world where everything just revolves around the technology companies. But of course, things need to move around the world. Houses need to be built. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, outside of the pure technology companies, where do you see AI making an impact, whether it's organization, culture, otherwise, in the non-tech companies?
Absolutely. When I think about AI impact, it's basically there is a horizontal impact where big tech is playing. There's also the vertical impact, which is the deep technical knowledge of a certain field and a certain area where AI can be very impactful. And different enterprises would employ AI in my mind, the way I describe it is in three different ways: either cost cutting or increasing the revenue, top line. Or the third one is coming up with new products and coming up with new systems that are actually going to create new revenue streams. So when we look at basically companies and enterprises outside of the Silicon Valley or outside of our tech world, we will see that actually AI can have a significant impact in oil and gas. AI can have a significant impact on the legal field. AI can have a significant impact in accounting. AI can have a significant, and there is a long list of areas, except that it usually comes down to deep subject matter expertise, which is where big tech usually is lacking, because they are building horizontal systems. They are building, like for the common use case. And that's where there is a lot of really good opportunities. That translates to inside the different enterprises, it usually translates into change management. And it usually translates into changing the culture, changing the processes, changing the systems in order to be able to integrate AI tools. And in the sense, there is always the need to build a growth mindset that enables the workforce, that enables the individuals inside the different organization to learn and to improve processes and to integrate different systems. One seminal paper, unfortunately, it's an HBS paper that we actually that I worked with the organizational behavior professor to introduce to her class back in the days, is on Microsoft and their change management and transformation between a Windows world to a new Azure world or cloud world, and now an AI world. And being able to actually not just change the culture from the different artifacts that they put on the wall, but also all the way to change the performance evaluation for different talent in the team and different human resources, and change the bonus structure, and change what's being celebrated through awards or through announcements, and change also how the CEO behaves. So I remember, for example, 2014, when Satya went to Grace Hopper, the Tech in Women or Women in Tech conference, the large one, and he misspoke, and then he apologized. And that was unheard of from a Microsoft CEO before. That shows vulnerability, that shows growth mindset, that shows learning, and that's all was part of the technology change and part of the change management that he was leading inside the company. So highly recommend reading this case on Microsoft on change management, and it's going to be all coming down to change management in the end of the day. Yeah,
it's fantastic. So this is a good opportunity to sort of acknowledge and pull in a question that we just got from one of the folks who are listening in. So Carolyn Papajan asked, working in the nonprofit sector, where do we see AI having an impact here? And I'll just mention real quick, because you alluded to this a second ago, how AI can have an impact in legal. And as you know, I'm a former attorney, and I did some of my pro bono work with legal aid. And one of the biggest challenges with legal aid attorneys is that they have massive caseloads, 400 or 500 cases, but have zero resources. I was at a big Manhattan law firm where we had infinite resources, but most legal aid attorneys don't. And so one of the opportunities that I've spoken about to legal audiences about AI is really around that. Like you can do a lot of that prep work, whereas a legal aid attorney would get to spend 5 to 7 minutes on a matter before going in front of a magistrate judge or a judge to address this. By having AI researchers kind of figure out the issues and figure out whether or not there's an error there, like it really magnifies the impact of those attorneys. And so one of the things that I've seen generally with AI, and what we use with one of our companies now, is that, a lot of those routine tasks that need to be done over and over again, that usually you need lots of staff to do, that's great things for AI to do, so that for the much smaller teams on tighter budgets, they can focus on the sort of highest value work. That's kind of my quick response to Carolyn, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as well again.
Absolutely. You have been on the forefront of this as well on the legal field, TJ. And yes, I agree with you. It's all about improving processes in order to reduce the bottom line, improving processes in order to increase the top line. And in this case, it's impact. So improving the cost, increasing the impact in a nonprofit, and then coming up with new projects in order to be able to have an even bigger impact through new processes and new systems in place. So whether it's marketing, so for example, so being able to replace the marketing efforts and reduce the cost that we used to spend on marketing through AI tools and SEO tools is one way, or accounting is another big line item in terms of cost for nonprofits. And, like all of the different fields. So I would look through the different line items in terms of cost, look for where AI can reduce this cost. So that's already improving your bottom line. Then look at where AI can actually help you have a bigger impact to improve your top line impact. And then what are new ideas where we can integrate AI into our systems in order to even have bigger impact that aligns with our mission as a nonprofit. 100% agree with you.
Yeah. So now that kind of leads into the next question, which is, what are the barriers to adoption? Why aren't more organizations adopting AI? What are the challenges that are kind of preventing it? Whether it's the bigger companies or the smaller companies that we were just talking about, the nonprofits.
Absolutely. Usually it's the technical knowledge and how much mystery is around AI. I teach an AI workshop, and one of the things that I start by saying is that AI is not a new field. Actually, AI have been around, the term was coined in 1956. And that's usually, like a wake-up call for everyone in the room. Oh, so it's not as magical as it seems today, like where it can do everything. So being able to distill AI into actual capabilities and actual what can it do and what cannot it do, or what it can and cannot do, in order to be able to address what's needed, and in order to be able to boil it down into actual use cases that it can drive real impact. So this is number one. Number two is usually also in terms of talent acquisition is one of the challenges, and being able to get the right talent on the team, whether at the executive level or whether at the building and scaling teams, especially when we are competing for machine learning engineers with BigTech, and we were competing with them. Yet we're still very early in the process. We're only scratching the surface today in terms of the impact of AI. So I expect that there are going to be a lot of investment in bringing more talent into the AI world through education and through different programs and formal and informal certificates, in order to make sure that we actually have the right flow of people in the room. And as importantly, is being able to equip our executive teams and board members with a real understanding of what's AI and what's not, and how can you use AI in day-to-day versus how can you use AI for building your AI strategy on the longer term for your company, for your enterprise, for your nonprofit, for your startup, in order to make sure that it's actually useful and that you're capturing the return on investments. And another barrier of entry that I, from talking with several Fortune 500s, usually that comes back down to is, what's the return on investment? I mean, basically, we're investing a lot. Where do we see the value? And being able to actually address the return on investment through a very specific process of, this is the use case, this is how it costs us, this is how it, and seeing AI as just another technology, and being able to see the value of the technology and the return on the investment of this technology is going to be very critical to move forward. The last barrier is data. And usually it's a case of those who have data and those who don't have data, and whether you can acquire the data or not. And that's going to be quite an interesting field from a business point of view over the next 5 years, in terms of mergers and acquisitions for data as an asset among different companies. So excited to see what's going to happen in this space in the next few years.
Yeah, and that last point, it's interesting to see how OpenAI, when it came to market, was basically leveraging as much data as it could possibly glean from the internet, whether or not that was copyright protected or not. And so there's been issues there. So I can see definitely whole businesses being built on data brokerages where you're providing training data and data for the models. The other piece of that's interesting is that one of the big barriers is, as you said, talent. I wonder how much of this becomes recursive, where the AI is getting to the point where it can actually do the work that the talent would otherwise do. I know with my company, our engineering team has basically expanded its capacity by 100x by basically building their own engineers out of AI to do work that they would otherwise have had to do. So it's pretty interesting to see how it's going to be used to work on itself over time.
Totally. That also brings the point to the importance of an AI strategy and having a clear understanding of what to integrate when, because otherwise, I mean, the tools are out there, but and it's going to be critical to know what are you doing in this space and exactly how you're doing, as you mentioned, TJ. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're getting into some of the concerns in the question. So I'll kind of put the question to you more directly. What keeps you up at night? What are the risks? What are the concerns you have about AI?
Oh my gosh, bias is very data biases is very high on my list in this space. Specifically with speaking of data is very critical. It's going to be the differentiating factor. It's going to be the real moat for different companies. So having biased data can impact the results significantly in terms of how we're implementing AI systems and the results of AI systems. And this is specifically true when we think about the different aspects of our lives where AI sooner or later going to be a part of. Just one example that comes to mind right away, an actual example which is we're using machine learning models, deep learning models specifically, which don't have much transparency into them because of their stochastic behavior. That's by definition, and that's part of their power. We're using them in an area like mortgage approval. So when you go to buy a house, you apply for a mortgage in the bank, and then they use an AI model in the background where it adds a lot of information and a lot of factors into it in order to be able to tell whether this person is trustworthy, we should give them the mortgage at this rate, or this person is not. And because the AI by nature is the model in the background by nature is non-transparent, we cannot debug it. If the data that it has been trained on is biased towards certain genders or towards then certain races or towards certain, then the results is going to also be biased. As we say in data, garbage in, garbage out. So if the data that have been trained on, the model have been trained on is garbage, what we're going to get out is garbage. Yet, research is also showing that we as humans tend to believe AI output at a higher credibility that we believe other humans, which can be very scary when we think about that we're going to approve folks based on an AI model that we will tend to believe more their output than our own intuition and gut feeling and what we see in front of us, numbers and what have you, and what it can have from an impact, for example, on certain neighborhoods, because that might mean that folks might be approved, certain races might be approved for a certain neighborhood, while other genders might not be approved for that other neighborhood, which can be crazy when you think about it 100 years from today in terms of how our neighborhoods will look, how our streets will look, how our humanity will look, which can be very scary. And that's what keeps me up at night. Diversity and inclusion is another area, and specifically around how we are building AI models that are supposed to serve all humans. Yet when we look at the technical talent that are building these models, usually it's not diverse enough to represent all different humans. And basically not every point of view is represented in these models. Not every point of view is represented in the kind of applications that we're building. And that will lead us to have some biased outcome from this exercise, which also can be very challenging and very scary from an application development and from a system development. The example that I used in terms of breast cancer is one example in terms of being able to focus on solving one problem that's very easy to solve from a technical point of view, but because we didn't have representation in the room for women it might have been delayed for quite significant amount of time. So that's another concern that I have with today's AI efforts.
Fascinating. I think Jocelyn Chang asked the question, which I think is kind of touches very closely on what you were just talking about. And we were, in response to the prior question, we were talking about how you can sort of eliminate a lot of work that used to be done by humans, particularly when you're resource constrained. But what does it mean when you kind of stretch that out? Like what becomes the role of humans in an AI first world? It's clear it's going to generate a lot of value for companies, right? Reducing costs, optimizing everything, basically. What's the role of humans going forward, right? Are we basically going to be baristas and AI systems managers? There's a handful of things you still need humans to do.
Let me ask you, would it be so much fun to have a long weekend every other weekend? Or so let's work first.
Great question. I will answer in the affirmative. Yes, it would be more fun to have a longer weekend.
Just kidding. All kidding aside, it's very similar to what we have seen in the industrial era and in the industrial revolution, where we humans were busy by moving parts and by doing all of the mechanical work. Yet, once we have electricity and once we have the industrial revolution introducing a lot of mechanical systems that can take away some of the efforts that we used to do in order to do that kind of mechanical work and muscle work, basically we had a lot of plenty of time to do the next big thing, which is get education, improve our intellectual capacity and intellectual capabilities, being able to think about bigger ideas and better ideas, including AI being one of them, and being able to raise the bar to the next level. So that's my expectation in terms of, like once we have more time, we as humans, we like to keep busy. We like to do things that are impactful, that are useful, that are moving the needle one way or another. So I think we're just going to go through the process of appreciating our free time for maybe some time, and then going back and thinking about what can we do next, what's bigger and what's most useful for humans.
Yeah, I think throughout history, there's been panic with every sort of revolution of technology, right? The advent of the electric loom in the 17th century, thought everyone who made clothes was going to be out of work. And that was the case. You had a handful of apprentices running the looms, but those people went on to do other things.
Right.
And I think there's also a sociological piece here, which no one is fully appreciated, which doesn't ever really come to light that often, which is the world's population is going to keep getting smaller and smaller over the next 150 years. And so we'll need more technologies to do things that humans used to do because there won't be as many humans to do them.
Absolutely. The typewriter, the typewriter job that I started with, I mean, basically it doesn't exist anymore. I mean, we now can typewrite for ourselves. It's very recent. I mean, we're talking about 25 to 30 years ago. And now, it doesn't exist. So it's already happening. There's
an image that I use when I present on AI, and it's the basement level of 50 women plugging in switchboards in an office company, and it's not like they didn't have work after that. We're coming up on time, and so we're gonna have. I know there's more questions coming in, but I do want to get your take again on sort of the next big thing. Like, what do you expect beyond what we know today to sort of be the thing that everyone's like, we didn't even see it coming, right? 5-10 years from now.
So this is a very hard question that I have been giving it some good thought, but also asking around to see different opinions of different folks. And it's very hard to predict 5 to 10 years from now, given that that prediction is surely going to be wrong, but also that things move very fast and very slow sometimes. But one technology that I am very excited about is the AI assistance technology, and having the agentic AI take over some of the actions that I've been basically, bugging us every other day, and having a personal assistant in the form of an AI agent that knows you very well, that knows your capabilities very well, that knows your needs very well, and knows exactly where you need to be, and why, and giving you all of this information such that it's some kind of a twin digital twin that's accompanying you, but also taking care of all of the tasks. So, for example, imagine that you're in San Francisco, you wake up in the morning, breakfast is ready, coffee is ready. You just eat and get your coffee, and then you leave the house, and there is a Waymo that's standing and waiting for you. As soon as you leave, it takes you to the office. You go to the office, all of your calendar and meeting is ready, and basically you do all of the important stuff, and you get rid of all of the cognitive overhead that otherwise would be bugging you by making sure that this is all taken care of by your agent. And then once you're ready to leave, there is a Waymo that takes you to the restaurant where your wife knows that you're going to be over there to meet you for dinner for date night, and also her calendar is synchronized with your calendar, and everything is streamlined, and the kids, you know exactly where they are, what they are doing, and basically their educational process. I mean, basically integrated into everything and bringing all of the information to you. So that's something that I'm excited about, and hopefully, I hope it's going to happen in the next few years in our lives.
So I'm gonna go ahead and guess that you probably have some stock in Facebook and Apple and Google and Microsoft. But if you could you know, take $1 million right now based on what you just said and put it in a company or a couple of companies. You've mentioned Waymo, a Google product. Obviously, a lot of this is going to happen on a phone, whether it's a Pixel phone or an iPhone. What do you think is going to be that centralizing? Which company is going to own that central agent, that each person's personal assistant agent, or will it not be owned by one company?
You're asking the $1 trillion question.
I'm looking for some stock advice.
I wish I know the answer with high confidence, but it's many of them that are just like fighting startups and small ones. So as we know from our financial analysis classes, it's always the case that you want to diversify because you never know where things are going to go. But I would bet on some of the big tech. I would bet on some of the startups that are working right now, especially in the agentic space. I would bet in basically at the application layer more than anything else, because that's where I believe the magic is happening, and that's where I believe that the real impact is going to happen. Yet it's going to be an ecosystem. So I don't expect there is going to be one winner takes all, rather than it's going to be different players that are coordinating and working together.
Fantastic. Lamia,
if anybody on the call knows, please let us know. We're going to invest in this.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been super informative and super interesting. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Lamia, and
Thank you.
wish you all a good day.
Have a great one. Thank you very much for the kind invite and the awesome conversation today. Take care.
Take care.